My name is Ray Lemming, and I have been a professor and part-time professor. We call it an adjunct at Illinois Institute of Technology for 34 years. Well, during which time I worked full-time jobs at different various jobs, and that's where I met Reza. Reza was my graduate assistant in several of my courses I teach, and very prolific writer he is. We asked him to write a little proposal on what his thesis would be, and I think it was 10 days later we got 200 pages, which took poor Dr. Arditi a whole semester to read through. But I've known Reza for some time. My very first degree was from the University of Dayton in social psychology. And I became, from there, an Army officer in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and I ended up in the construction business. I've worked in construction companies in the local area. Very first project that I was in charge of was building a wastewater treatment plant for hazardous waste, heavy metals. And I've worked as an estimator in an estimating company. I've worked on steel mills and wastewater treatment plants. And based upon that, I got a job in an engineering firm, Harza Engineering, which for about 75 years was the world's premier hydroelectric company in water resources. And they actually did a few projects back in the 50s in Iran. And basically what I would do is I would go to these locations and I would put in the estimating, the scheduling, and the cost accounting systems to track payments and figure out how we track a project. And those three general areas fall into a functional area we call project controls. After about 7 years, I had an opportunity to go to a government agency in Chicago that manages the wastewater treatment plants. And I was hired as both an attorney and as a professional engineer, and to deal with the construction claims. And I was in charge of construction of, that time our program was about $200 million a year. And there was one guy had one plant and I had the other 5. So I probably had a program where we had $150 million in construction, and on that $150 million, we were probably paying somewhere $30-40 million a year on cash flow on just my job. So, not the biggest things in the world, but at least in the United States, it was the biggest sewer district in the United States. So I did that for, I think, 12 years, and then I retired. I've done that off and on for about 4 or 5 years. As I said, the founder of I don't think I said it to you, but we were talking to Reza before we started recording. Dr. Arditi, who founded our construction management program, he retired this last summer, just a year ago. And I thought I was kind of going to slowly slow down a little bit now that I'm 70 years old. And they prevailed on me to take Dr. Arditi's job. So now I have a full-time job after 34 years of being a part-time professor. And I am in charge of the construction programs at Illinois Institute of Technology. This particular conversation that Reza and I had a couple times when he was my teaching assistant deals with the differences between American construction management and how it developed versus the PMI or the PMP certification, project management, and how other people in the world have used that as a certification in the construction business. I'll let you know that I've taught the PMI course here at IIT for about somewhere between 12 and 15 years. And I've been teaching the construction management, like I said, for 35 years now, and been practicing it all my life. So that's kind of where we're at. And one of the questions you ask is, how did construction management develop in the United States and Iran and Iraq and across that area? And the cradle of civilization was between the Tigris and the Euphrates there. And there's many, many structures that are archaeological and, are 3,000 and 4,000 years old. And the question comes up, how did they do that? And if we look at some of the decoding of the cuneiform and that it was done, we find the Code of Hammurabi. And I don't know how much you study that where you're at or not, but it's considered the first set of written down laws. And in the Code of Hammurabi, we find the first construction laws. But if you're going to build a skyscraper up there, you got the problem of, how do I get air in and out, et cetera, et cetera. And in the earliest buildings, the windows opened and they closed. It's kind of funny, but one of the things we have left over from that is paperweights. You can go to an office store and buy a weight to hold the papers down, because if the window's open, the paper's going to blow around. But when our technology got so good that we didn't have to open the windows anymore, we still give out paperweights as awards and with your name on it and stuff like that. So I'm not too sure why we do that, but we still do. And so our problem was, as we get into this tech, so we see as the Industrial Revolution comes along, it creates civil engineering. The design work, as the buildings got taller and got more complex, and we needed a mechanical engineer to put in the steam heat and this and that. We needed an electrical engineer to put in the lights and a motor to move the elevator and that. It started to separate out into groups, and the worker bees stayed with the contractor. So we end up with a fundamental system that that we teach here, that shows how construction management starts to develop around about ballpark numbers 1900. In order for us to put a design build contract together, we got to go the opposite way of what we've done for 120 years, and we got to make people legally be in the same group. And so they have all kinds of ways, by contracts and joint venture agreements, that they put together a team. Now, there's a reason for that. And the reason is, when we look at the design bid build in the yellow, the owner has a contract with the AE, and the owner has a contract with the general contractor. Standard contracts in the civil code, by the way, are called FIDIC. And we have the yellow and the red books, basically. And they're standard contracts. FIDIC is initials in the French for the French consulting organization. And in the Middle East, when I've been there, many of those contracts are FIDIC contracts. So how does the PMI or the PMP certification and the PMBOK come about? But anyhow, what happens is, as industrialized America develops in the early 20th century, we start bringing people in on how to manage factories. And the stereotype of that is the industrial engineer. And the industrial engineer, for the most part, their stereotype is they're standing there with a clipboard and a stopwatch. PMI project people, they say, well, what are all the steps we need to do perfect project management? And they put it into a book called the PMBOK. And it's nothing but a bunch of bullet points. In the PMBOK, if I put a page in there, how to do high diving into a pool, and I followed all the bullet points, I would win the Olympic gold medal for high diving because it's in the PMBOK and it's on the points. I personally think there is a human element to project management that, they talk about it in the textbooks that I use in that. How do you deal with the problem employee? How do you get people involved? How do you do these things? But anyhow, the problem is we take this. Well, for the industry and manufacturing, PMI works great. We're kind of formalizing something we didn't do a lot before, and it's now becoming more and more important. And what's the most important thing in business? Profit. That's what we do with construction people. I tell my students, I said, look, we do move mountains. We do move rivers. That's our job. That's the fun part. We put cities where there weren't cities and roads, and we create wastewater treatment plants that otherwise everybody would die in their filth in a few weeks. So we do stuff that nobody sees, nobody knows, but we do it one piece at a time. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you asking me to do this for you. I hope that it was all positive. If there's a real dyed-in-the-wool PMP out there that I've totally offended them by attacking their discipline, I apologize. Not the intent, but to try to give a balanced picture from where I see it and how I see it. That's all.